Order. That's how we start down at City Hall. Ladies and gentlemen, yes. Well, are you good? Or I've got notes about that. Yeah. Okay. So. So this should be on. Is it this on? I don't. Hey, let's do a mic test. Could you guys test those mics?
Testing from at large.
Do we have the mics on, Chris?
Test.
Hello?
Test.
Hello?
It's
Can
on.
everybody hear me?
Testing. Can you hear us okay? Can you
How
hear me
about
now?
this?
Testy. I'm
Can't hear
extremely
Paul?
testy.
Oh, if Paul speaks right into the microphone?
Paul speaks right, but I'm speaking right into the microphone. You can hear me?
Huh? All right. Okay. Well, this is wonderful. We have what I would call close to a full house. Thank you very much. My name is Paul Lundberg, and I'm going to moderate tonight's Housing for All Gloucester Forum for the City Councilor at Large candidates. So, as kind of a appeared. We have 4 of the 6 candidates for city councilor at large. All 6 were invited, and we really appreciate your coming to talk about housing, which is a crucial issue for all of us. Let me start by saying a little bit about Housing4All Gloucester, who is sponsoring this forum and the other 2 that follow. We will be having a mayoral forum on Monday and a ward councilor forum next Wednesday. And it'll be the same format as we are having tonight. Housing4All Gloucester is a local coalition that's about 2 years old. And I would just like to read their mission and goals because I think they're very articulate and succinct. So the mission of Housing4All Gloucester is it's a community organization focused on solutions to increase fair, affordable, and environmentally sustainable housing. And the goals of this group are to advocate for and pursue a range of planning and projects to increase affordable housing options, both rental and home ownership, that respond to the current economic and environmental challenges that we face. Just by way of highlighting why this is such an important subject, 2 weeks ago, as part of the Gloucester 400 celebration, there was a forum at City Hall of the 5 former mayors and the current mayor. And every one of them said in their opening remarks, and there was a forum for them to reflect upon their vision of the city. Every one of them said the most important issue facing our city is housing, affordable housing, and available housing for our residents. And so Housing4All Gloucester, the group that is sponsoring this, has really has taken up that cause to make this to make all of us aware of these issues. This forum, and if you look on Gloucester for Housing4All Gloucester's website, you will see the candidates have answered a questionnaire, 12 questions specifically aimed at the question of how to about affordable housing and how to what kind of problem we have and what we can do about it. And so it is the shared goal of these candidates. I'm going to speak a little bit for them because I was one of them for several years. It is the shared goal of the candidates and of the Housing4All Gloucester to educate the voters and the public as to this issue so that we can all make an informed decision when we go to the polls on November 7th. And so with that in mind, I'm just going to say a few ground rules. The moderator, that's me, will ask a series of questions. We have 5 questions. They're based on the questionnaires that these candidates have already seen and filled out. Candidates will have up to 3 minutes to answer. Councilor Worthley is here, so if you want to take your seat. Thank you. Now all 5 of candidates who said they were going to be here. Councilor O'Hara said he couldn't be here tonight. The moderator will ask the questions based on the questions in the questionnaire. Candidates will have up to 3 minutes to answer. I may ask a follow-up question, but this is a forum and not a debate, so candidates will not be asking each other questions about their stance. This is an opportunity for candidates to express to you, the voters, how they feel about this issue. So the way we're going to do this is we've got a random seating in order, and I'll ask a question one at a time, and each person will be allowed to answer the question. And then we get to the second question, the next up person will start that. So everyone will have a chance to be the first answerer of a question. So with that, I think we'll get started. The first question tonight is a pretty, that's right, I'm sorry. There is a timekeeper over here. And the timekeeper will flash you a sign that says 30 seconds left of your 3 minutes, and then a stop sign. And so we know that councilors, some of the 4 of the 5 candidates before you are city councilors, and they really know how to moderate the time they speak. It's really amazing. Thank you. So with that, we will start our forum. And the first question is, do you believe that Gloucester has a housing problem? If so, who is impacted, and what do you think we can do to solve the problem? An overly broad question, but it's a good way for us to get started. And so we'll start with Councilor Tony Gross. But before he answers that question, I'm going to give each candidate 1 minute to introduce themselves. So, Tony, why don't you start with your introduction?
Hello. Paul introduced me. I'm Tony Gross. I've been a lifelong resident of Gloucester. I can't hear you, Tony. Been a lifelong resident of Gloucester. Give me an extra 10 seconds back, please. I married a wonderful woman for 35 years. She's a Gloucester native also. And we raised 2 children here in Gloucester who went to Gloucester Public Schools. My wife went to Gloucester Public Schools. I myself went to St. Mel's and St. Peter's. There are those of us who are old enough to remember what St. Peter's was. It was the old Fuller School. But anyway, my father ran Empire Fish Company. He was the general manager down there, and I spent my youth on the waterfront down there. And then I went to work as a commercial fisherman. As most commercial fishermen, I did other things. I went into the construction trades. I got my construction supervisor's license, and then I also got into wastewater management, and I wound up as the assistant plant manager at the wastewater plant. Now, I mention those 2 things because we have multiple major building projects going on, and the city council should have people there that are knowledgeable in the building trades. And with the wastewater, I think that'll be very important as we go into the secondary treatment addition. Now, could you repeat the question, please?
I'm going to let everybody else introduce themselves.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Jason, your turn, 1 minute.
Thank you very much. My name is Jason Grow. I'm currently an at-large city councilor. I've lived here in Gloucester for 23 years, and married to my wife, Sarah Grow, who many of you know is the Director of Advocacy at the Open Door. We have raised 3 daughters here in Gloucester, Matilda, Jemima, and Maisie. I don't want to forget your name. Who all went to Gloucester schools, Sawyer Medal winners, very proud of their education and their time in Gloucester Public Schools. We came here from San Francisco largely under the same circumstances that a lot of people are feeling today, which is the housing crisis. We were unable to find a place to live in San Francisco or the area around there, and we were lucky enough to find our way here. We love our city, we love this community, and we do whatever we can to make it better, which is why we're here, all of us, I think. As I mentioned, I'm currently an at-large councilor. I'm the chairman of the Planning and Development Committee. So we had the, there you go. That was a fast minute.
Last minute. Thank you, Jason. Councilor Worthley.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Jeff Worthley. First, I'd like to thank Paul Lundberg, former council president, for hosting this, or for moderating, and for Housing4All Gloucester for putting this event together. I'm 46 years old. I live in Gloucester. I've lived here all my life. My 2 children, I'm a single father. My 2 children, Jude is a freshman at Gloucester High School, and Lila is a 7th grader at O'Malley. I served in the city council 23 years ago for 2 terms on the Planning and Development Committee. I learned a lot then. And then I've worked my own financial service practice for the last 14 years. I do own a home in Gloucester. I'm very blessed and lucky to have done that with the help of the Cape Ann Savings Bank and our first-time home buyers program. I'm thrilled to be here tonight. I think we've got some great candidates. All of us here are trying to do the best we can to improve our city. And obviously housing is a big issue, so I don't want to be given the stop sign. I think it's about that time. Thank you again.
Thank you, Councilor Gilman.
Good evening. My name is Val Gilman. I'm currently the president of the Gloucester City Council. I've been the Ward 4 City Councilor for 8 years, and I've decided that I want to try to branch out so I can legislate change. I've learned a lot in my tenure. One of the things I'm proud of is that for 8 years I've served on planning and development. I chaired it for 2 terms. I also was in planning and development under the leadership of Paul Lundberg, which was very helpful to me in terms of learning the ropes. I love our city. My family and I moved here 54 years ago. My family, my parents, we were initially summer residents, And then about 40 years ago, we decided, my husband and I decided to make this our home. We love Gloucester. We love it here. I love the diversity. I think the diversity is second to none. We want to keep that diversity. We want to love everyone no matter what their preferences are. We want them to love our community as I do. So thank you very much. My time is up. Thank you, Sunny.
Thank you, and Chris Cicaranza.
Hi, everyone. I'm Chris Cicaranza. You might have seen my signs that say Chris D. Mercurio Cicaranza, so I have all the vowels and consonants ready for you. But in all sincerity, I had the pleasure of working in the last mayor's office, the last administration. I was the interim CAO. I have also served as the chief of staff in the city of Salem, the chief of staff in the city of Haverhill. So I come into this realm with a lot of best practices, a lot of good government, but more importantly, I want to listen to you about what your feedback is. Tonight we're talking about an important topic, housing. It affects all of us, every single one of us. And there are different approaches that I think you'll hear tonight about the ways that we work on this. But more importantly, it takes a village for all of us to talk to each other once again. The biggest thing I'm hearing while I'm door knocking is about communications. And I just want to say thank you to the organizers again. Thank you to you at home who is watching, and thank you to this audience for participating in democracy, because it is not a spectator sport. We need your help on this, and we are a better community for your feedback. So thank you all, and thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much, Chris. And I'll just introduce myself, Paul Lundberg. I served on the Gloucester City Council for 3 terms and 1 term as president. And before that, I was 6 years on the Gloucester Planning Board. And so I got my knowledge of housing and zoning down in the trenches. So with that, I'll ask the opening question again to Councilor Gross, which is a big question, but do you believe that Gloucester has a housing problem? If so, who is impacted? And what do you think we can do to solve the problem? Thank you. 3 minutes.
3 minutes, wow, that's a lot in 3 minutes. Absolutely, I mean, you know, there's a housing problem, not just in Gloucester, but really if you pay any attention to the news, it's worldwide. And so, yes, absolutely we have a housing problem. An affordable housing problem is what we have. Who does it affect? Well, it affects my kid, for one, as well as an awful lot of other young people. I was talking to the young man who I sold my lobster business to on my way here, and he was like, you know, come on. You know, he's living with his mother now. And he's like, I'm looking around, and it's, you know, $2,000 for a dump. He said, this is ridiculous. I mean, I know when I was in his position and in his age, we could rent things that were very affordable, and that allowed us to actually get started and save some money and, you know, continue to grow. This is just not an option anymore for our young people or for our you know, general workforce, really. It's not just about the affordable. It's the workforce housing problem. And as far as solutions go, I'm not quite, you know, there's, I guess, many aspects. One thing that I found, I went to the, my wife volunteers at Wellspring, and I went to that volunteer celebration last week, and I was not aware, and I don't know if it was just, it's my own fault, I guess, but of how much Wellspring does. Wellspring actually does an awful lot for providing housing for people in need, and they need to be celebrated, and we need to also maybe possibly follow some of their example where they are the tenant, and then they act as the agent for people who need affordable housing. That's one method that one solution that is being, but it's small scale. And I think that we're going to have to take bites at this at many small scales. Now, I'd like to thank Housing4All for Gloucester. You know, they ran the forum 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. I couldn't make it. There's been so many conflicting things that we attend lately. But these are the things that we need to do. We need to bring the citizens together for multiple gatherings or whatever forums, to roundtable forums, to discuss and to see who are we? Are we going to just sit back and allow us allow the market forces to make us a bedroom community? Or are we going to actually do things that we need to and have all of us make these decisions that are going to affect all of us, even though it's in individual neighborhoods? We all need to be working together to help solve this problem and not be exclusionary. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Jason, same question. You want me to say it again?
Nope, I got it. First off, I want to thank Housing for All for having the forum, and also I think one of the things we have in debates is trying to figure out the differences between the candidates, and unfortunately tonight, I think you're going to hear a lot of similarity in our answers, because I think all of us have a generally similar viewpoint on where the problem is. Yes, we absolutely have a problem with housing affordability in the city. Housing affordability and affordable housing. And who it's affecting, as Tony pointed out, it's our children. My 3 daughters who were raised here can't afford to live here. We have seniors who are living in homes that are far too big for them, who can't downsize. There's no place for them to go. So even if they want to change where they're living, there is no affordable opportunity for them. We are not able to attract families. If we can't bring families into Gloucester, what's happening, and is happening by the data that we're already seeing it, is that our community is aging. It is becoming smaller in terms of the people that are living in homes. So more and more people are living single and 2 people in a family, or 2 people in a house, excuse me. We need to figure out how we're going to regenerate our community, how to bring families in, how to keep families here. That's going to have to be done through economic development. It's going to have to be done through housing development. I think we have to get rid of the stigma that people have about the concept of affordable housing and what that actually means. When we're talking about affordable housing in Gloucester, we're not talking about base level housing. We're talking about housing that is still pretty darn expensive. And we need to find a way to get community involvement, community understanding that affordable housing is for our kids. They're for my kids, they're for Tony's kids, they're for your kids, they're for our parents, they're for families who are coming into this community to establish their roots. And if we can't do that, the tree's going to die. It's going to age, it's going to change dramatically. I've always said that the best way to change something is to do nothing, because you're going to create a situation where people can no longer afford to live here. The only people that can are going to be able to come in and buy huge houses, and you're going to redefine the entire definition of what Gloucester is and who Gloucester is. And I fear that that's probably one of our biggest challenges, is how do we get regenerated new blood, new life, keeping our kids here, and allowing that population to thrive.
Thank you very much. Councilor Worthley, do
Yes.
you need me to repeat the question? Or?
No,
Okay.
you don't need to, but thank you.
Go for it.
First of all, I do agree with Councilor Gross and Councilor Grow. I think the problem is pretty well identified. We have an affordable housing problem. Do we have a housing problem? I don't know. I've been doing a lot of door-to-door. I've seen some mansions, and I've seen some pretty expensive condos that don't seem to have a problem finding and attracting people. But we do have an affordable housing problem. And I think how we solve the problem is multifaceted. Firstly, how we talk about the problem impacts the solution. I never want to hear someone ever say again, those people, okay? Those people are us, okay? I live right outside the TOD district. I live right off of Maplewood Ave. Those people are us, okay? So whenever we have those kinds of conversations, we need to stop that. We need to work on a program to build affordable housing specifically. Now, I worked with Habitat for Humanity and helped them build 4 houses. I am not a contractor. I did the lumping work. I did the part that didn't involve my brain because I don't know how to build. But I helped build 4 houses throughout the North Shore. And it was a very rewarding experience because we also got to meet the families that moved in. And it's a real issue for those people, and the gratefulness that they had for having a place that they could afford was so moving, and we need to do more of that. The Gloucester High School used to have, in the vocational program, they used to build houses, and there'd be a lottery for a Gloucester family to then be able to buy that house. But I think we need to be really thoughtful that there's 2 sides of this coin. we have a housing problem, but we also have a housing affordability problem. We'd love to have housing for all, but I can't imagine there's a bank in Gloucester that will give financing to all without the ability to pay for that. And how does that work? It comes back to having good jobs here that then can pay for the kinds of salaries that people can have those jobs to afford to live here. And how do we do that? Part of it is economic development. We need another variant. We need another company like that to provide thousands of jobs for people in Gloucester. We also need to work from the educational standpoint. How is it possible to have people who either graduate and go to college at a higher percentage or start a business the day they walk out or a month after they walk across that stage? We need to do more to keep local jobs that are high-paying jobs, and that will then help people be able to afford to live here. The Lieutenant Governor just announced a program today where there's an office that's been created to assist cities and towns with leveraging federal funds for infrastructure. We should be at the table for those conversations. We're competing with 351 cities and towns, and we want to be able to get our fair share for that. I've got a lot of notes here. I want to say I don't believe in the trickle-down effect. It doesn't work. It hasn't worked for 30, 40 years, that if we say, okay, let's have people just build more, there's no guarantee that that person who buys that house is going to be someone who needs that home. And it could be that they buy a $5 million home, they're not going to leave a $4 million home in Gloucester for someone else that is affordable here. I'd like to touch on that again when we come back. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Val, you're next.
Thank you. So my value, one of my values in my brochure, is seeking reasonable and well-planned affordable workforce housing initiatives so that seniors, veterans, and young families can afford to live in Gloucester. Let me explain what that means. According to Dave Holden, who oversees the Gloucester Housing Authority, he gave me some data when we were filling out this very thoughtful survey questionnaire. Thank you, Housing4All Gloucester, for coming up with that. I thought it was excellent. 305 local elderly 60 or older are on a waiting list at the Gloucester Housing Authority. 238 non-elderly disabled applicants. The rental waiting list on our Section 8 rental assistance list has 1,140 people on the waiting list. State Family Housing has 71 local residents. Then Ruth Pino gave me some updated information about housing stock in the real estate market. I'm sorry, do I get 10 seconds to try to shoo this bug away? It's kind of annoying me. It's like a mosquito. So there's no housing stock, last I looked at this information, that's between $299,000 to $650,000. The average median price for a house in Gloucester a month and a half ago when we filled out this thoughtful questionnaire was $1,592,000. And then we have our kids that are graduating from college, like my son, who's 23 years old, and he so much wants to live in Gloucester forever. He loves it here. So that's a significant problem. My background was HR. I was a 25-year HR manager and vice president at a Fortune 500 company. And I get what it takes to attract, retain, and motivate people. All the businesses that I talk to in our city are so staggering right now because they just can't find help. And if they can't find help, it's mostly because there's no housing in Gloucester to live in. So this beautiful place that has wonderful industry and Gorton's and applied material, people can't live in Gloucester because there's no housing stock, and that's really a problem. So what are the solutions? I love the comprehensive plan. I think it's good because right now we're very polarized in our views, and I think that will allow people to talk on a neutral ground, and then after that we really need to get to work. And we need to listen to people, but we need to move forward because we need housing in Gloucester. It's so important. Thank you.
Thank you, Val. Chris, your turn.
Thanks, Paul. So you've heard it from all of us. There is an issue, but how do we tackle this in a meaningful way that we can actually get solutions for the short term and for the long. Well, for the short term, what we have to do, having the pleasure of worked in a few different mayor's offices, the first thing I want to tell you is what I can't do. I don't have a magic wand. I don't have a silver bullet. Nobody on this stage does either. This is an issue not just across the region, not just across the state, but the entire country. Having said that, we can learn from some best practices. You've already heard that we have wonderful data here that tells us, especially in thinking about our 400th anniversary, that we've had basically the same population for the last 100 years. But the households have changed. We have to look at duplexes and how we are incentivizing people to either rehab their single-family homes, which they have probably outlived in terms of having a single residence there. We need to find better incentives to which we can make them into a multi-dwelling household. But I also want to make it clear that the council can't do anything by itself. The council can't solve this problem. We have to work in harmony with the mayor, we have to work in harmony with the governor and lieutenant governor, and we have to know our lane. I think one of the biggest things that I've heard out there, frankly, is the misinformation about what low-income housing is, what affordable housing is. You've already heard some jargon, some acronyms. What is TOD? That's transit-orient development. If I can't even explain to you what we're talking about, how are you welcome at the table here? We have to get back to basics. We have to talk about what our values are. And frankly, one of the conversations I'm not hearing here tonight is our seniors. Our poor seniors are going to be priced out of this community. What are we doing in terms of development for them? You know, I'm very fortuitous that I was in an environment where I was able to rehab my husband's home on Centennial Ave and make that into a two-family. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law helped my grandmother-in-law down the way. That's generational opportunity that I had. That's a privilege. Not everyone has that privilege. Not everyone has that access. To Councilor Gilman's point, how are we going to embrace the diverse voices to make sure that rising tides lifts all ships? These are the policies that I'm interested in. We can talk about nuanced things, but it starts with a leader who's going to provide a vision of including you in the conversation, offering solutions such that it helps the most benefits for the most people, and making sure that your voice is heard. We can't do this alone. That's the answer. We cannot do this alone. I want to make that as abundantly as clear as possible. There is no silver bullet solution, but having these conversations with you folks showing up, with you folks at home, and having a civil conversation in such a way that we can talk about what's at stake, because frankly, I think I'm the youngest person on the stage. I'm the last probably person that bought a house here. I think I have the most to stand for that. So I'm fighting for you, and I invite you to that journey as well.
Well, thank you, Chris. That answers a perfect segue into the next question, which will go first to Councilor Grow. And that question is this. When you speak to your constituents about income and housing costs, what are they saying and what conclusions do you bring from those conversations? So, Jason, you first.
That's a very good question. I think that the number one thing that people say, and the number one thing I take away from the conversation, is that people talk about how they can't afford to be here anymore. Most people talk about taxes as being the primary generator, but I think what people are really talking about is that the home that they were planning on living in for the foreseeable rest of their lives is becoming unaffordable to live in, or is becoming too big. There's no place for them to go. And I did mention that one of the biggest issues we have is with seniors, and being able to stay in their community without having to stay in a house that is no longer appropriately sized for them. You're absolutely right, Chris. We have to bring people into the discussion. I think we had some very, very good discussions last year when we went through the housing production plan zoning amendments. I mean, we spent months talking about those issues. I don't think that, unfortunately, I don't think the results went the way that should have gone, and I think that had they gone differently, I think we would be helping to mitigate some of the problems that we're talking about tonight. We're not going to see rampant growth in rampant development. What we need to see is we need to see incremental growth. We need to see infill growth. We need to see moderate growth happening on a manageable scale. And I think that's the other thing people say. They don't want to see wholesale change in their neighborhoods. They're very concerned about a dramatic change. And I think that if we look at solutions that have incremental change, that that acknowledge the fact that the change is going to be taking a generation rather than 5 years, then people are going to feel a little bit more comfortable about accepting that kind of change. I think that everyone is afraid of or wary of a dramatic change that takes away what they think is the character of Gloucester. I think that I've always said that evolution or change is evolutionary or revolutionary, and if it's evolutionary, you can contain it, you can modify it, you can deal with it. If you don't do that, you're going to have revolutionary change, you're going to have dramatic change, you're going to have the kind of change that people are wary of, which is whole neighborhoods changing, districts changing. I don't think anybody on this council wants that, and I think that is a loud and clear message that comes from the public. But we do have to acknowledge that there has to be some change. If we refuse to change ever, or we don't allow change on our neighborhood, but we expect change over there, we're not gonna get there. So the message is we're wary of change, but I think the answer is we have to think about how we're going to do that change and be thoughtful and compassionate when need be, and aware that there's a strong sense of place here, and that we don't want to jeopardize that with just being too broad in our brushstrokes.
Thank you, Jason. Jeff, you're next.
Thank you very much. I think the question was, when I talk to my constituents, what do I hear them
Yes.
saying about this? When I listen to my constituents, what do we hear? I think that's a key ingredient to all public services, being a good listener. So, sorry, if I could repeat that. The question was, when we talk to our constituents, what do we hear? And I think the real key piece is when we listen to our constituents, what do we hear? And I think we hear both sides of this. People do not want to see their neighborhood destroyed, and I think that's a strong word that they use. But they also worry that their children can't find a place to live here, that they can't afford to live here any longer. I've knocked on almost 2,000 doors this year, and it's a steady theme. The other part of that is people don't recognize Gloucester any longer. Someone asked me if I'm afraid that Gloucester is going to become gentrified. It already is. It already is gentrified. Let's not make any mistake that there's some wave coming. It is here. It is here, and it's now. I'd like to not get too into a debate about what other people have said, but this is where I think it gets interesting. Councilor Grow ably chairs the Plan and Development Committee, and we did spend a lot of time on those zoning proposals. And I say this with great respect to the Housing Production Plan and the Planning Board. But the very first recommendation that came out of this, the goal was to create more affordable housing, was to allow two-family by right on Eastern Point Boulevard. Eastern Point. How does a $5 million house, the average sale in Eastern Point, get split into a duplex, and that second unit is somehow affordable to someone in Gloucester? And it would take away all the rights of the neighbors to have any input on what happens in their neighborhood. And the second one same thing happened for downtown. When I served on the Planning and Development Committee, we passed and approved almost every single application that came through for housing and for development in different neighborhoods. But what happened is we had dialogue. That dialogue led to things that people didn't know were even problems. The neighborhood would come out in opposition to a development, and they would say, I'm not really opposed to it, but I just don't like that the light shines in my window. Oh, the lawyer would say, or the developer would say, we can change that. I don't like that their fence blocks my view of XYZ. I can't pull out of my driveway because of that. Oh, we can make that change. So that dialogue was exceptionally helpful to make things easier to be approved at the full council level, because we had that engagement. And so anything by right skips two pieces: that there should be neighborhood input, and the second part is there is no guarantee that that unit on Eastern Point is going to be affordable or go to a Gloucester resident. So what have we actually done? We've actually just continued the gentrification. So I think we need to be really thoughtful about whatever changes we are targeting as effective are actually effective at solving the problem. And so we need to do a better job identifying the problem, be better at listening, and make sure that the things we are doing actually help the people we're trying to help, which is Gloucester residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Val?
Thank you. So I spend a lot of time listening because I am in planning and development. So we get a lot of people calling us, emailing us. And what I'm hearing is, first of all, that developers are taking up all the real estate that people could use to make affordable housing, and that's a problem. That Airbnb are taking over affordable rental units, which is another problem. It's tough to live here because I can't afford to live here, and although their houses are more and more valuable every year, as are the property taxes. And it's a problem for people that want to stay in those houses because all of a sudden they're retiring and they're living on Social Security, and all of a sudden they can't afford to pay the taxes, and they don't want to sell their house. So it's not an income generator, rather it's an issue where they're struggling with making their payments. And the things that I try to tell them is I try to talk to them about ways that they can defer betterments and they can defer property taxes, and the ways that they can use action to learn how they can get fuel assistance, things like that. But we probably don't do a good enough job making those referrals to them. And I think that's one big thing that we can do better, is taking more time with our seniors and giving them ways that they can figure out the path of ways that they can live here. There are things like accessory dwelling units, which I'm so proud that during my tenure when I was chair of P&D, we were able to approve accessory dwelling units. And that was great because that's perfect for a senior couple that want to age in place. They develop a bathroom and a kitchen and over their garage or someplace, and they're able to generate some extra income to help them age in place. So I think that that is a really strong thing. And I think we've continued to press hard to come up with more exclusionary housing units, which is so important because that's the only way that we can get from the 8% or a little bit under in terms of where we stand to 10% that we need to be striving to get to. And it seems like we're stuck at about 7.8%, which is frustrating. We need to keep building our inclusionary housing program and making sure that we can find reasonably priced places for our seniors to live. Thanks.
Thank you. And Chris, same question.
Thank you. So everyone up here is a true public servant in that they care about this community, they care about your feedback, but we all maybe have a slightly different approach about what our values and priorities might be in that regard. To that end, I don't worry about Gloucester citizens telling me what they feel. There's a lot of authenticity is the word that I use. And the beautiful thing about this city, it's been around for 400 years now. It has ebbed and flowed. It has adjusted in time, as I spoke to previously about the household size. But we come together to talk about what's at stake. And what's at stake here, as to what Councilor Grove spoke to, is the very fabric of who we are, our chemistry, our character. And what people are afraid of when I'm talking to them is losing that, the sense of community, our beloved community. You know, just door knocking now, I see all the Halloween decorations going up. Families are still here. They still want to have their families brought up here. I see my niece in the audience here tonight. I want to make sure that she has a place that she can grow up and feel like she has a part of Gloucester within her as well, too. Going back to what we've said earlier as well, too, unfortunately, it's going to have to take some tough decisions around development, maybe zoning, but it can't be done in a vacuum. And I think one of the biggest things, echo Councilor Gilman, is a better dialogue about the opportunities in front of us. I think there are ways, whether it is with enforcement, with the short-term rentals. I don't think we have enough support within the Inspectional Services Department to actually go out there. If you pulled up on your phone right now, on a Realtor.com type app, you can see how many seasonal houses. That's inventory that otherwise we could be using for people that need it. Now, mind you, I'm also on the North of Boston CVB, the tourism board for the region. I think there's a harmony that we can develop. But it takes the right conversations to have to set the tone. I'm sick and tired of elected officials misleading us into thinking that it's all this or all that. There's no such thing. The only thing constant in life is change. So how are we passing the baton to the next generation so they can be successful here? How are we making sure that a working family can bring up a family without going bankrupt? How are we making sure a senior who finds out that they have a private road, suddenly needs a betterment, and has to spend that money out of their pocket to succeed here. No one is doing that work from my lens of doing the communications about the programs that Councilor Gilman spoke to. That changes if you elect Chris Carranza, I can promise you. I was the first ever Director of Communications for the city. Something we desperately need. I'm not here to point fingers at anyone. It's just, I think we can do better. I think Gloucester deserves better. And by the way, our constituents absolutely deserve the best. And they feel like they're being left out. I will be your voice. This council does care about you, but I want to make sure that it's clear that you have to invest in people that are investing in you.
Thank you, Chris. And Tony.
Yeah, could you repeat the question? Because I think we
can.
lost the thread of it.
So the question is, when you speak to your constituents about income and housing costs, what conclusions do you draw from those conversations, and what are people saying about those issues?
Well, we all know that you know, the regular constituents that are non-business owners, the workers, like the young man I spoke with who bought my business. He's self-employed. He, you know, went to the bank, got his loan, bought a successful business. He's doing it successfully. Can't afford to live here. Makes very good money. Can't afford to not live with his mother. You know, that's just one example, but it's so typical of our regular constituents. But let's talk about the business constituents who have spoken to me about this major concern that workers, they can't get workers. We can't, you know, not just business owners, but we're going to have trouble getting teachers. We're going to have trouble getting policemen, firemen. You know, we're our own constituents too. So speaking to those people, it is imperative that we find some way, some solution that's not just affordable housing, but also workforce housing that we have got to somehow address. And just creating market rate housing is never going to address it. That is only, each time a home gets sold, it just ratchets the price up for the next home to be sold a little higher. We've been discovered. We have to really understand that. And as has been said all across this table, we need to, as a community, to come together to really discuss this. And I think Housing for All for Gloucester is a major player in this role. And I thank them for this forum, but also for all the other work, because they're putting a spotlight on this and they are making us think about it and come up with ideas. It's not, everyone at this table has thought about it. There is not one person here who has ignored it or has made bad decisions about it. We all, it comes from our heart. We just want what's for the best for the city. The conclusions is that we really need to engage the public. And I think just having, you know, multiple roundtable discussions where we openly and honestly with an outside facilitator, because there is so much disinformation that goes around. We really need to start from scratch and to have this conversation begin again. So I guess that's about it before I get the stop sign.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Tony. So we're going to move on to question 3, and that will go first to Jeff. So here's question 3. What are the major barriers in our community for creating more affordable housing? In addition to using deed restrictions, are there other tools to overcome those barriers? And should those tools include more multifamily housing by right in all zoning districts? That's a lot to unpack, but do the best you can.
Can you just ask the third part of that question?
So should the tools that we have for creating more affordable housing, should one of those tools be including more multifamily housing by right in all zoning districts?
Okay, so the first part was, what are the barriers to building affordable housing? And I think I mentioned it earlier, is how we talk about it is a barrier. I don't think we have the right numbers all the time. We don't have the right demographic information. And then it turns to personal issues, personalities, and you hear this undercurrent of racism and classism and elitism and all these things that do nothing to help the people that we want to be helping, that does nothing to move the conversation forward. So really getting clear definitions of these words that we use is probably the starting point. As far as some of the barriers, I had made a proposal to the mayor's office, and Mayor Verga actually told me he liked it, and it was to approach, and I had 3 meetings with them, the EDIC, the Economic Development Industrial Corporation. They manage and have jurisdiction over our industrial parks. And I said, why don't we look at going up, where there are no neighbors and there's no views that will be blocked, and going up high and giving them the opportunity, the business owners there, the property owners, to build workforce housing there. I enlisted the support of Bob Gillis, who said it's worked in Beverly because you don't have neighborhood opposition when you don't have beautiful ocean views being blocked or any kind of views being blocked because there aren't neighbors there. And I worked really hard on that, and they have complete control over that. It went nowhere. I think we should revisit that. Okay, you're talking about, for example, the Cape Ann Medical Center building. On weekends and nights when people will be coming home, they're closed. So they have plenty of parking. They can go up and have access. Yes, we need to have buses and we probably have other amenities, but you could work on ways to say, how can we turn that into a community? And yes, there'll be other issues, right? Will they not like the smell that comes from Happy Valley? Maybe they will, maybe they won't, but, right? But I knew I'd get a laugh out of that. I hadn't planned it, though. But, you know, there's different issues when you mix residents and businesses in an industrial park, but that could be a very lively place to bring people and say, this is an opportunity, and it's city-owned. Lots of that is city-owned property, so we have lots of ability to say, we want to see X, Y, Z there. We'd have to work with EDIC, the Economic Development Industrial Corporation. They have sole control over it, and they said if they approve this, they could amend their covenant, and it could be done. I'm not saying that will solve the problem, but it will certainly help. The last part of your question about should multifamily housing by right be an ingredient in the plan for addressing the affordable housing issue. I think that Gloucester has always been a very welcoming community. I think that our permitting has been 91% of people who apply for permits get them. Yes, that creates a little bit of cost with attorneys or architectural plans, but that's not the barrier. Okay, there's so many other barriers which we've touched on here. By right means I don't get a notification if my neighbor turns a single family home into a 2 or 3 family home. And where I grew up, there were 6 of us in the family. At one point, we were all in different colleges, we had 6 cars. So how do you say to someone, your neighbor is going to build something, it's going to turn into a second family with 6 cars, and there's no room in the
TA, but we want to make sure that we're actually encouraging people to use their bikes, actually encouraging people to use alternative means of transportation. Now, that's a vision for younger folks. As we just spoke of earlier, this is an aging community, so that might not necessarily be true of every scenario. Having said that, it is obvious to me, if you look at the history of Gloucester, we were a community of multi-dwelling units. That's a fact, folks. You can't debate the facts. What the Housing for All group has done has provided facts, not Facebook posts, not misinformation and secret groups, not secret squirrel texts. We have to get back to a dialogue. What you've heard from all of us tonight is enough of the misinformation and the ignorance. It is nothing to be celebrated. I am totally embarrassed by it. You should be too. You're being misled. Are you getting the best bang for your buck when a city official misleads you about what's on agenda for the evening? Consider that for a moment, please. Because the reality is, for my generation and younger, we will be inheriting whatever you leave behind for us. And doing nothing is the current game plan. That is totally unacceptable. Unacceptable. And again, as a person that has just bought a house and made sure that there was another unit there so I can afford to live here just to get there, I think that there is a truth amongst a more silent majority out there of the have-nots. The haves are doing just fine here in Gloucester. We will become Newburyport. We will become another community that's going to be priced out. I worry about that tremendously. So you have to make sure that when you're talking about the major barriers, you start with communications, setting the right tone. And I think that we should be looking at the multi-housing ordinances. There's a few different options. You know, having the pleasure of working with Salem and Beverly, there's a strong interest of looking at our waterfront. We are at the Bay State. We should be looking at ways so that we're not looking at dilapidated MBTA railroads. We should be getting more creative with our transportation. That's something I very much want to look into. So it's not just about having a plan. It's not just having compliance. It's about having a vision, as you've heard from all of us tonight, that works in harmony with what's at stake, that works in tandem with the Lieutenant Governor's vision, especially as the former mayor of Salem and now the Lieutenant Governor. She's leading on this. And it's true. This is absolutely true. To be clear, they're putting out the guidance from the state to municipalities. They will not accept anybody that's not in compliance. So that's a non-starter, folks. Let's not let people tell us, oh, no, there's a way around that. That is totally untrue. That's an unfair statement, and you need leaders who are going to be up here that are going to tell you the truth. Not just a convenient truth, not just a Facebook post, an actual hard truth. That's a hard truth. So I don't think plans are developed such that they have to collect dust. I think they have to be activated. I think the exercise of everything we're talking about is very worthy, but I do worry about those that don't speak English. I do worry about those that are vulnerable, those that don't have access to technology if they want to chime in. So it's our obligation, especially as elected officials, to go out and listen to you and to bring that feedback back. So to that end, making sure that you have elected officials that are committed to all people, not just, especially those that are vulnerable. You know, those people that are using the MBTA are very likely middle class or not of the greatest means. So let's think about them, about the ways that we're affecting their lives when it comes to these questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Tony?
So, what do I understand about the pluses and minuses of the TOD? Well, they listened a little bit when they put out their final guidelines. I think they made one change they made two changes that were significant. And I don't know why they got missed in the first time around, because they're pretty evident and obvious. One is that they added you could have mixed use, was in compliance, and then they also said if you have existing inclusionary language, you could do that. Inclusionary language for those means that if you have 6 units or more, you have to add 1, and then as you get up to 10, then it's a percentage and of your units, and there's a formula that goes into that, but I won't go into that. But it just means that you have to have an affordable unit in the larger developments. A big minus, and it's been spoken about here about, using bikes, and I mean, when I was much younger, and bike was my major mode of transportation, but every time I got on it, I would say to whoever I was leaving it, well, I'm running the gauntlet again, because Gloucester was not made up for bikes. We can paint a track in the road, but when the road's barely wide enough for 2 cars, it's not going to have a lot of room for bikes. But, did I mention unreliable public transportation as far as the MBTA has not been the most reliable source for our workers who try to get up the line to go to work, but also you got to remember they have to get from where that destination is to their employment. And how do they get there? If they have to take an Uber or a taxi cab, this is an added burden on people that don't have the financial wherewithal. So we need to think about these things. These are real problems that we need to think about. The areas around the train station, which is in most areas is in the downtown, more heavily densely populated areas that have the people with the most needs usually. It excludes senior housing. So we can't have credit for any, and we've been talking about seniors a lot tonight. Seniors are a very vulnerable part of our population for housing. To not include that, I understand they want it for families, but to not include, to at least give some credit to the cities who have done a decent job like Gloucester has, that's another one of the minuses. We also, I asked, during the ARPA, I had requested that maybe we do a parking study around where the TOD area would be so we know how many cars are there. What is the situation? I live downtown. My wife and I live downtown. We had 2 kids. And you would come home and you would I would, maybe not you, but be aggravated at my neighbor for parking in my spot. Now, it's his spot too, or her spot, but it's a quality of life issue. We have to remember that parking is a big issue.
Thank you. And Jason.
I am not going to park in your spot. Okay, as Chris said, the MBTA, the Mass General Law 3A is the law, okay? And the consequences are real. We will face sanctions that will be detrimental to this community. So I think the first thing that we need to understand is that while this is coming down from the state, and I explained to people, you know, these things don't happen because someone just woke up one day and said, let's impose regulations on our communities. It happens because communities avoid doing what they need to be doing. They avoid the hard work that needs to get done to keep their communities healthy, and this is a response to that. But this is all in our control. This is a positive. Everyone thinks that the state is going to come down and tell us what we can and cannot do. We have the wherewithal and we have the control to develop the TOD in the manner that best suits Gloucester. And I think that's one of the things that people forget about. There is no requirement to build any units. This is not about housing production. It's about really forcing communities to take a hard look at what they have and what is potential, and to find out where that balance creates something that they can create and live with. And you know, it's complex and simple at the same time. I think that people overthink the 3A legislation and the language, but it really is about requiring the community to sort of come to terms with how are we going to address this issue, and what would be the optimum solution for our community in that regards. I think the CPI is going to do a great job at helping to inform that decision, but I think that we don't have the luxury of waiting to get started on this work. I'm really hoping that the mayor puts forward a working group on the 3A specifically very early in the next term, because while the CPI is going through, it is a global look at the community and will help inform through data and input. The 3A has to get done by the end of next year. We don't have the option of delaying that. The CPI is a little bit more flexible and is much more about sort of long-term vision. We need to combine that long-term vision discussions and those roundtables with the chore of actually putting together some solid concrete plans of what we would do and how we would comply with 3A. And I think that, you know, the community input on this is going to be absolutely critical. But as Tony pointed out, there are some flexibility in this now with mixed use that certainly is much more compatible with the train station area. And I'm looking forward to getting the kind of input and crafting by right work. The thing about by right is that it is not free for all. By right still has to maintain very strict rules and regulations about what that property does. And until we define what that is, there's no by right. We have to. By right comes from us defining what that is and what we find is acceptable, and that's going to be the job.
Thank you, Jason. Jeff?
Thank you. I'd like to spend maybe 30 seconds going back to an answer that came from the last question, and I have a great respect for everybody on the stage, table here. Councilor Gilman, you referred to the fake news and only having facts, and I think that's critically important, but I also don't think that any one of us should be the judge of what is a fact until it's been verified. So you said that the proposal that got shot down last time was for 3-family by right downtown, and it had to be it could only work if it was owned by a homeowner to convert to 3-family. That simply was not in the language at all. It's completely not true. Anybody could have bought a building and convert it to 3-family, whether they live there or not. That's fake news if we say that's otherwise, okay? When I started doing some real advocacy, started to try to do some advocacy for our homeless population, Councilor Gilman called me and said I should be thanking her for taking my interview off of 1623 Studios because I said, there's 100 people living in the woods. And she said, okay, well, you said there was nobody living in the woods. And you walk your trail, you said there's nobody living in the woods.
I said at the early, we're not going to, this is not a debate, so
Okay.
whatever Councilor Gilman said stands on its own. Please just
Fair
go
enough. I
forward
just
on
think
your
we
own.
should be considering the facts cannot be interpreted by any one of us. We need to have some way of really identifying these things. So the 3-family by right wasn't just homeowner built. It could be anybody could buy a place and convert it to 3-family, and that didn't pass. Okay, to the MBTA and TOD. There are some things that are really good about this. It's forcing a conversation that we have to have about providing more housing. I don't have a lot of confidence in the MBTA. I don't know if anybody here could argue that one. We have gates that fall on top of people, on top of cars. We can't get the MBTA to be working to the standard. We need to say to people, you're going to move here and not have a car because you can rely on transportation that is unreliable. It isn't fair to those people. It's also not fair that our government is saying, if you don't comply to provide more housing for people who need it, we're going to take away programs that help people, our most vulnerable population, to be impacted negatively by the state that wants us to help these people. So it's really not fair to say, if you don't comply, you will be punished. And Councilor Gross mentioned that there's been 2 changes since the first rendition of this came out. There's actually a third one, which is if you have a busing, I think it's tied into the multi-use. If you have a way of busing people to the train station, those areas could also count. So I think that we do need to have a dialogue with the state and propose things that work for Gloucester that might also comply if they haven't been considered already. For example, I'm running out of time here. Whenever that thing goes up, my brain shifts to 30 seconds. I'm sorry. Right now we have this mandate. I accept it as a mandate, but it's already changed 3 times since they put the mandate out. Are there other changes that could be considered to allow for other parts of the city being, for example, we have 2 MBTA stations. Are we talking about West Gloucester as a station as well, as a way to provide some affordable housing?
Okay.
Sorry, I had to rush through that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we're down to the last question, and Chris, you get to answer it first. And the last question is, can we advance our community goals for protecting the environment and increasing clean energy through our housing initiatives?
So if you think about some of the policy areas we're talking about tonight, you heard about workforce economics, making sure that we have a good employer here. But the trickle down of that, as we know, you hear people when they work in the service industry, the retail industry, the restaurant industry, that they can't find quality people to be keeping things sustainable. That's because we don't have a major employer making sure that there's a good workforce for them to live here. So with regards to environmental issues, sustainable housing that promotes energy efficiency, these green building codes, you've heard about stretch codes, that's obviously going to be helping to protect the environment. But I also believe that when we talk about some of these policies relative to the state talking about getting rid of gas stoves, I worry about our seniors being able to afford that. So I think, look, I have a Prius and a Tesla. I'm all about green and clean, trust me. But I also know there's practicalities that come with that. I have to plug in the car. I have to make sure that it's going to be efficient when I plug in the car. So when we think about these considerations, it's all well and good to have environmental justice. But I also want us to think about things like, transit, as we talked about, workforce development, economic sustainability, again, racial justice, diversity. These are all parts of housing that are part of a multifaceted portfolio that, when we talk about housing, it's not just a singular issue of the cost, where we put it. It's about everything else that comes with it. And I think relative to green initiatives, I think, we've seen the Mass Save program. I helped to do the Gloucester Green program to promote the efficiencies under the last administration to make sure that the seniors and middle-class folks could actually have the chance to modernize their homes with cost-free incentives. Those are the programs that I think we should be looking into, the Mass Save type programs. I'm not a fan of creating ordinances that dictate that you must do something that's going to hurt your bottom line. I think people are struggling enough right now, frankly, and I think it's a tough time to ask people to do additional work relative to green initiatives that are going to, frankly, hurt their bottom line. They're worrying about getting food on the table right now, and I think asking them to suddenly get rid of their gas stove is a tough thing to do. Having said that, I think there are practical ways to which you can advance those types of codes and regulations. You evolve on it in such a way that you can test it out in certain populations, but you don't necessarily mandate it. There's a common sense way to get the good that you need from that. But I don't want to just talk about environmental justice. I want to talk about racial justice. I want to talk about all the other things that come with that too. So I challenge my other compatriots up here to think about those. Never mind what the moderator said.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Excuse me. Tony, you're next.
Yes, as Chris just mentioned, he got to go first, so he got to grab all the good little sayings. But anyway, sorry, Chris. Mass Save, I actually, before I figured out that it was going to be too great a commitment between other things, is I went to become a heat coach. And that's a great thing where people go in and they help people. It's free. You go in, we have a sustainability coordinator now. We just put a heat coach we just got a grant that allows us to fund a heat coach who goes in and tells people, this is what we can do. We can do what everybody commonly known as mini splits. They're heat pumps, and they can greatly reduce some of the energy use that goes into that home. Of course, there is an upfront cost, but Mass Save can mitigate some of that through grants, and that's an excellent program. Chris is absolutely right. We need to talk about the racial and social justice. One thing I'd like to discuss, though, is the average medium income. Gloucester is lumped into the greater Boston area, which many times is about $30,000 higher than what ours is. Last week, I spoke with Congressman Moulton's office because this is a HUD, Housing and Urban Development program that we're plugged into. That's their formula. That can we just make some adjustments to allow communities like Gloucester that are not as well off as far as their average medium income to lower it down so that it does not affect the market rate rents, because yes, it's all well and good on the inclusionary and on the Section 8, the landlord gets that higher rent, but even in the inclusionary, like Halyard, there's 30 units up there. It started out, at above market rate, and that was the affordable. And because we're locked into Greater Boston, it's a big problem. So right now, and I've talked to the administration, they're on board with these discussions. It's in Moulton's office. They said, all right, it's in our court now. We'll go talk to HUD. So I just wanted to let everybody know that those discussions are happening about the AMI. Thank you.
Thank you. Jason?
Can you just, for my own edification, repeat the question?
Sure. Can we advance our community goals regarding protecting the environment and increasing clean and efficient energy through our housing initiatives?
I don't know, to be honest with you. I mean, I love the idea that we can dictate whether or not we use green energy or solar or electrical whatever. I mean, solar 30 years ago, who had solar panels on their house? Nobody. These things develop over time because it becomes obviously more practical, and you can develop your technology to adapt and become cheaper, and ultimately this stuff becomes about the bottom line for developers and people who are building houses. But I think that Tony is onto something in terms of the AMI, which he's absolutely right. I mean, a good percentage of Gloucester qualifies for affordable housing. All right, that's just a simple truth. Our income doesn't rise to the level that we are that this is somehow some secondary group of people. Most of us qualify for this. If we adjust the AMI to a level that's more appropriate to us, that would change, and the qualifications would go down. I'm going to lost my thought there a little bit, but Mass Save, these are private and public partnerships that do a great job, but I don't think that we tried. Councilor Worthley tried to put through an ordinance that required the city to look at energy efficiency. Well, that's great, and I think a lot of us are agree with that sentiment. It didn't have any teeth, unfortunately. It didn't require the city to do anything. It becomes very difficult at that point because it drives costs up. And I think that if we're looking at trying to develop affordable housing and housing that's affordable, that if we then layer on additional requirements that increase the cost of those projects beyond the natural desire to keep those project costs down, I think you're going to inhibit the development of that kind of housing. I think you're going to get it on the higher end, but you're going to have inhibited development on the lower end that we really need. That's pretty much I think it for me.
Thank you. Jeff?
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'd like to just correct one thing that Councilor Groh said. He said that I tried to put forward a renewable energy ordinance. It passed. It passed 6-3. And so I just want to be clear. But it's okay. And it wasn't requiring residents and businesses to do anything differently. This was require the city to say that when we are looking at a new project, for example, the new school on Webster Street, it's solar ready, but there are no solar panels on it. And for 2 years, that even though it has been open for 2 years, that roof could have been getting energy and saving the city money. The turnaround time on renewable energy, at least for solar panels, is 5.5 years. We've been in this business for 400 years. I'd like to think we're going to be around enough to see that return on investment. So I was pleased to see that happen. And the reason why I wanted to push that and worked on it for about a year is the state has what's called a stretch code, and the stretch code is being adopted by many communities throughout the Commonwealth. And when you adopt it, you are maintaining your green community standards. And it does impact the cost of housing and businesses. If we were to adopt that, I used to work for the Chamber of Commerce. I can hear them saying, well, if the city of Gloucester doesn't have its own solar panels or renewable energy, why would you require businesses to do it? Why would you require residents to do it? So I thought, okay, the least we can do is actually